صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد. يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا. أيحسب أن لم يره أحد. ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين. فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة. فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة. يتيما ذا مقربة أو مسكينا ذا متربة. ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة. أولئك أصحاب الميمنة. والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة. عليهم نار مؤصدة. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل. صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المبارك الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الغوي الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين، والصلاة والسلام على خيرة خلق الله أجمعين، وهو رحمة الله للعالمين، هو أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الميامين المهديين المعصومين المظلومين المقتولين الميامين، ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran about the position of the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and there's no better day than to remind ourselves of this ayah from Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah 21, that Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that the Prophet is the best example for us. Now I know that we already know this, so I'm not. But the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something else. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. That the Prophet is the best example for those who desire Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That if there's something in your heart that draws you towards God, the Prophet is here to guide you towards that inner voice, to bring out that inner voice. Meaning, man kana yarju Allah wal yawm al-akhir, that within each and every one of us, especially as human beings, we have this voice within us, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. Liman kana yarju Allah. This is very interesting. I want us to just take home here, simple thing here, from this verse. The message of the Quran and the message of the Prophet who's embodied in this is meant to light the candle for which the wick already exists in your heart. That the desire to live your life in a way that when you look back on that life, you've achieved something that you truly feel is beyond material achievements. But then you start asking yourself a question: for whom am I doing it for? Why am I doing this? What is the ultimate mean? What is the ultimate ends of what I'm doing? This is where it comes. Liman kana yarjullah. This is for the one who hopes for God, desires God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That for that person, you can have a conversation with them about the Prophet. Because there will be something about his message that will attract them. Wal yawm al-akhir. Not only that, but you believe in God and you believe in the last day. Because you know that ultimately you're responsible for what you do in this world. There is an afterlife. There is accountability. There is mas'uliyat. There is this day of responsibility that will come. وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. And they're constantly remembering God. So for these people, the Prophet is the best example. So the Prophet is not the best example for every person in what way? In the sense that they will imitate that best example. So there are certain prerequisite criteria. Like when you take a course, there's a prerequisite. There are 3 prerequisites for the Prophet to become the best example for an individual. Number 1, they should have that desire within their heart to know Allah, to find Allah, to live for that greater transcendent cause. Number 2, at the end of the day, there should be this idea in their mind that they're responsible to someone. That there's a sense of accountability for their actions. That what they do in this world, every atom's weight of it, they will have to answer for it. وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. And they're constantly remembering God, and then the Prophet becomes a part of their life. Now the subject that I've chosen for tonight, very briefly, is the mourning and the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein, because I know that we're now coming towards the end of the mourning season of the Ayyam al-Azza, and I wanted to take us back to its beginning. And we'll see where the Prophet as the best example fits into this story. But to begin, let's begin with the narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who tells us in a very beautiful narration, which is narrated in Al-Kafi, where the Imam says, نَفْسُ الْمَحْمُومِ لَنَا الْمُخْتَمِ لِظُلْمِنَا تَسْبِيهِ. that the breath or the heartbeat of the one who's distressed for us shall know that this heartbeat of distress for the Ahlul Bayt is the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهَمُّهُ لِأَمْرِنَا عِبَادًا. And his concern for living his life according to our teachings. هَمُّهُ لِأَمْرِنَا عِبَادًا. And his desire to live his life according to our teachings is the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a very important narration, because in here it encapsulates ayam azza and the philosophy of ayam azza. That for every heartbeat of sadness, of distress, of gham, for the Ahlul Bayt, this is the tasbih of Allah. We're going to see how and why in a moment, okay? We're going to see how this is the case. And their concern for our affair is ibadah. Now, the question that comes up here, is these mourning ceremonies an invention of Shia Islam? Did Shias one day wake up and just invent this majlis that we have here? Or this idea of crying for Hussein ibn Ali? You know, a lot of times people say Shias only know one thing how to do, and that's to cry for Hussein ibn Ali. Which is, of course, an exaggeration, and that's not true. But the point is, where did this come from? Where did this come from? Why is it important? And how is this connected to the visitation of Al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam? So we're going to explore this. Before we get there, let us go to the life of the Prophet. We read in the traditions of the Prophet, just to put this whole issue to bed. This is an excellent article in one of the journals published by Al-Ataba Al-Husayniyya Al-Muqaddasa called Al-Isla Al-Husayni, one of the great academic journals from the Hawza. There's a superb article in this book entitled basically about the history of Azadari. In here, the author says, and I've checked the reference, قد أخرج ابن عساكر في تاريخ دمشق. Ibn Asakir is one of the famous historians of the Sunni school of thought. Okay? Ibn Asakir. He wrote a history of Damascus. It's not only about Damascus though. It's a huge history. I think it's like 100 volumes or something. It's massive. In this history, he has a section on Imam al-Hussein. Sunni. وَمَا يَرْبُو. And he says here, في ترجمة الحسين وما يربو على 300 رواية في بكاء النبي وإخباره بمقتل ابنه بشط الفرات. He says that in this book alone, there are 300 riwayas. 30? No. 300. 300 narrations in this book alone. In Ibn Asakir's Tariq Madinati Dimashq, of the Prophet doing what? Buka ala al-Husayn wa ikhbar bi maqtalihi. Tears over Hussein and prophesizing his maqtal and his death. 300 reports in a non-Shia text. So let me ask you a question then. Could we not say that the buka for Imam al-Hussein is not necessarily, did not begin with the sunnah. The sunnah did not begin with Sayyidah Zainab. The sunnah did not begin with Imam Zain al-Abidin. The sunnah is sunnah to Rasulullah. Literally. Tabarani and on and on and on. There are so many sources that the author tells us. وذكر ابن سعد في الطبقات جملة من أخبار بكاء النبي على الحسين وكذلك ذكر ابن حجر العسقلاني الهيثمي والسيوطي وأحمد بن حنبل وأبو يعلى وغيره. These are like the most famous traditionists of Sunni Islam. Ibn Sa'ad, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Suyuti, who's much later, Al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. These are the who's who. All of them narrating what? The tears of the Prophet over his beloved fragrance, Rasul Hussein, وإقامة المآتم وإقامة المأتم عليه. Ma'tam. Ma'tam means mourning. Aza. Doesn't mean, that's not what ma'tam is. Ma'tam. Ma'tam in Arabic means what we are doing. This is ma'tam. Where did the Prophet perform ma'tam? In the house of Aisha, in the house of Salama, in his own home, in the house of Ali and Fatima. And on and on and on. He goes on to give details. وَكَذَلِكَ نَاحَتْ الْجِنْ وَبَكَّتْ عَلَى الْحُسَيْنِ. And he narrates, this is in non-Shia sources, that the jinn cry over Hussein ibn Ali. وَأَكْثَرُ حَيْثُ بَكَاهُ وَنَعَاهُ فِي بَيْتِ أَبِيهِ. In the Bayt of Ali, in the house of Salama, in the house of Aisha, and others. Just so people don't, I'm not interpolating and exaggerating here. You can go to all the references. Ibn Asakir, Ibn Sa'ad, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. This is a part of Islamic identity, not Shia identity. This is not Shia. I don't know what people don't understand about this. This is not Shia sectarianism. This is the Sunnah of the Prophet. To such an extent that we read that the traditions on this subject are mutawatir. They're narrated with so many different chains of transmission from so many different sources that they have tawatur, meaning they're narrated so famously that you cannot deny it. So these 2 months and few days of mourning is the sunnah of the Prophet that you have been engaging in. Your attendance here is the sunnah of the Prophet. وَلَا شِيعِي وَلَا سُنِّي. In sectarian terms. It's from the Prophet, meaning it's something that it's not necessarily only for one sect over the other. Clearly, after the death of Hussein ibn Ali, very quickly we would see mourning ceremonies occurring. We would see at the time of Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Bakr, Imam Sadiq, and on and on. There's so many majalis. In those majlises, what do we read in the ahadith? The Imam would gather like this. He would ask someone to read. He says, فَانْشُدْنِي فِي الْحُسَيْنِ. Recite for me a nasheed about Hussein ibn Ali, or ritha in Arabic. Yani marthiya, ritha, marsiya. Recite for me a marsiya. He would recite one. Imam Sadiq would tell Abu Ammar, فَانْشُدْنِي فِي الْحُسَيْنِ. Recite for me another one. He would recite another one. Recite another one. And then Abu Ammar says, I kept reciting حَتَّى سَمِعْتُ الْبُكَاءَ مِنَ الدَّارِ. Until I began to hear crying from the house of Imam Sadiq. Meaning it was a majlis. It must have been full. Because they're in the courtyard and he can hear the crying from inside the house. Think about this. These are established narrations. Go to the book of Muslim Dawari, the student of Ayatollah Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khoi, where he discusses all of this. One of the greatest students of Sayyid al-Khoi in Hadith, Shaykh Muslim Dawari. In his commentary on Ziyarat Ashura, in there he has an entire chapter on this with all the sources, comment as Ziyarat and on. This is not from here and there. This is our identity as followers of Rasulullah and followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And we read in, for example, in some of the earliest poetry, from the time of the 4th Imam and the 5th Imam, what does the poetry say? Even by non-Shias who would make their way to Karbala, what was some of the earliest poetries? مَرَرْتُ بِقَبْرِ الْحُسَيْنِ فَفَادَ عَلَيْهِ دُمُوعِ غَزِيزًا. That I passed by the grave of Hussein. This is some of the earliest poetry. Earliest, just one line. What does it say? I passed by the grave of Hussein. Because they could not visit because of policing and oppression. مررت بقبر الحسين ففاد عليه دموعي غزيزة. And my tears came like a waterfall. فاض عليه دموعي غزيزة. Just from passing by the grave of Hussein ibn Ali. فاض عليه دموعي غزيزة. This is the poetry, and we see this in Sunni texts and Shia. This is not, as I said, la Sunni wa la Shi'i. هذا تاريخ الإسلام. This is the history of Islam. Let nobody tell you that this is some sectarian, ghulu, rafidi nonsense. That's not true. This is all those issues that have geopolitical concerns and other matters that get into it. If we're historians of any real depth and concern, well, at least, or substance, or people that want to follow the sunnah of the Prophet, then we could at least say that this is a valid form of religious expression, a valid form of religious devotion. What does Imam Rida say at the beginning of Muharram? Very important what he says. Istuhilat fihi dima'una. Imam Rida says that in this month, on the 1st of Muharram, he says that in this month our blood was made halal. Our sanctity was taken away. Our family was taken prisoner. Our women were taken prisoner. وَإِنَّ يَوْمَ الْحُسَيْنِ أَكْرَهَ جَفُونَنَا. That on the day of Hussein ibn Ali, our tears come out. Aansu nikre. Our tears are coming out. And our eyelids tear. Akraha jafunana. They tear. Akraha. Akraha jafunana. Imagine. Wa asbala dumu'ana. And our tears flow. Imam Rida said, this is in Uyun Akhbar Rida. فَلَبَيْكَ الْبَاكُونَ. So I am with the criers. فَإِنَّ الْبُكَاء يُحِتُّ الذُّنُوبَ الْعِظَامِ. For the tears for Hussein wipe out even the great sins. Why is this the case? We'll get to this just now. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Why? In order to understand this, we have to go to the Prophet himself. Rasulullah. This is the day of Rasulullah. And then I will read to you the maqtal of the Prophet tonight. The maqtal of the Prophet himself. But I'll share with you this narration. It's narrated in Saduq's Kamaluddin wa Itmamul Ni'ma, with the sanad of Saduq going up to, I believe, Ali ibn Asim, and from there, from our 8th Imam going to Hussein ibn Ali himself. So from the 8th Imam to the 7th Imam to the 6th Imam, 5th, on and on. So Ma'soom narrating from Ma'soom to Ma'soom to Ma'soom. Where Hussein ibn Ali, Imam Zain al-Abidin is saying, I heard from my father Hussein ibn Ali, who said, دَخَلْتُ عَلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. I entered the presence of Rasulullah. Rasulullah turns to me and what does he say? Marhaban ya Aba Abdullah. Welcome, O Aba Abdullah. Come. Imagine. Ya Zayna samawati wal ard. O the one who is the beauty, the decoration of the heavens and the earth. Zayna samawati wal ard. Ubay ibn Ka'ab turns to the Prophet. He says, how could anyone but you have this title? He turns to Ubay, do you have kufr after iman? Would you doubt in me? He says, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَنِي بِالْحَقِّ نَبِيًّا. And I swear by the one who sent me as a prophet. إِنَّ الْحُسَيْنِ فِي السَّمَاءِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That the Hussein of the heavens is greater than the Hussein of the earth. That there's two realities of al-Hussein ibn Ali. There is the spiritual reality, the mithali reality, the ukhrawi reality, the unseen reality, the metaphysical reality, and then there's the physical Hussein who is probably 3 or 4 years old at the time when the Prophet is saying these words. Then the Prophet continues to Ubay ibn Ka'ab. What does he say? فإنه مكتوب عن يمين العرش مصباح هاد وسفينة النجاة, because his name is inscribed on the throne of God. Now, of course, the throne is not a physical thing. It's representative of God's power, knowledge, majesty. إنه مكتوب عن يمين العرش سفينة هاد مصباح هاد وسفينة النجاة, the lantern of guidance and the ship of salvation, and an imam without weakness, imamun غير وهن وعز وفخر وبحر علم, and he is a sea of knowledge and treasures. Meaning, don't waste your time with Hussein by asking him about this world. Ask him about the next world. And that's why we read on the day of Ashura, when the companions of Hussein went to fight, what happened? As they went out to fight, رَأُوا مَنَازِلَهُمْ فِي الْجَنَّةِ, they saw their places in heaven as they went out. كانوا يتبادرون إلى القتال, that they went out to fight. And they saw their places in heaven. And they saw the Hur al-Ain embracing them and taking them to heaven. Because it is through Hussein that he opened a door into the unseen. It is through the heart of Hussein that that door opens. That is why when you are under the dome of Hussein, you enroll them in Riyad al-Jannah. You're in a piece of paradise from among paradise. Or a garden from among the gardens of paradise. Because the soul of Hussein, when one has wilā to him and love for him, that soul allows your soul to be unveiled. And thus their companions could see what they saw, Habib and Muslim and Zuhair. They reached that highest level of iman, and that's why no one can be compared to the ashab of Hussein ibn Ali. Not in this regard. These shuhada are exceptional. Among the non-ma'asumeen, of course. They are exceptional. What does the Prophet say now? He continues, subhanallah. He says, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ رَكَبَ فِي سُلْبِهِ نُطْفَةً طَيِّبَةً. Because God has placed in the genetics of Hussein, in the loins of Hussein ibn Ali, a blessed seed that he created before existence itself. And before any seeds of existence existed, the seed of Hussein existed. And because of that, Allah revealed to me certain supplications. That if the creation of God recite these supplications, Hussein will be their shafi, their intercessor, fi akhiratihi, and Allah will relieve them of their burdens. Allah will relieve them of their loans. وَيَسِّرْ أَمْرُهُ وَأَوْضَحَ السَّبِيلَ وَقَوَّاهُ عَلَى عَدُوِّهِ, and He will empower him over his enemies. And He will make his affair easier. Who is saying this? Rasulullah. Just a reminder, this is Rasulullah telling us this. And how old is Hussein ibn Ali at this time? Who can tell me? 3? Yeah. 3 years old. This is before Karbala. So a question to ask is, did Karbala bring the status up of Hussein ibn Ali? He's 3 years old. Ubay asked the Prophet, Ma hadihi da'awati ya Rasulullah? What are these du'as that Allah revealed because of the seed of Abu Abdullah? He says, Allahumma as'aluka, Allahumma inni as'aluka bi kalimatik wa ma'akid arshik. Oh Allah, I ask you by your names, by your words that are implanted on your throne, I ask you by the places of your heaven, sukano samawatik wa aradik wa anbiya'ik wa rusulik, and by your prophets and your messengers, wa an tastajiba li faqad rahaqani min amri usr, that my affair in my life has become so difficult. So make it easy for me, O Allah. فَاسْأَلُكَ أَن تُصَلِّ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ, and for you to send your blessings on Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. وَأَن تَجْعَلَ لِي مِنْ أُسْرِي يُسْرًا. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. But why? What is this all about? Mu'mineen. Why all the fuss? Na'udhu billah, it's not a fuss, but it's just an expression as some naysayers would say. Why? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet now. Why? What is the greatest thing that we will face in our life? The greatest taklif, the greatest difficulty that we will face? Maut. Death. Each and every one of us will face this. What does Allah tell the Prophet? And the Prophet tells us, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يُلْقِنُكَ شَهَادَةً أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ عِنْدَ خُرُوجِ نَفْسِكَ. That Allah, because of these du'as that you recite, because of the creation of the seed of Hussein, because of your love for Hussein, because of your commitment to my grandson Hussein, Allah will do your talqeen Himself. يُلْقِنُكَ اللَّهُ شَهَادَةً أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. That Allah will ensure that you die on La ilaha illallah. What do we recite when we go to the qabristan? Who can tell me? What do we recite? Yeah. وَاحْشُرْنَا مَعَ مَنْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, or مَعَ أَهْلِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Oh Allah, raise me with the people of who? Of what? La ilaha illallah. And here the Prophet of Allah is telling us, because of our love for Hussein, our commitment to Hussein, our tears for Hussein, our obedience to Hussein ibn Ali, Allah will ensure that we say La ilaha illallah at our death. Not the talqeen at our grave, no. The talqeen when we are about to take عند خروج نفسك. When we are about to take our very last breath in this dunya. What greater gift could Allah give the Prophet than this? That Allah will teach us to say La ilaha illallah. Then the Prophet continues, he says, هَذِي نُطْفَةٌ كَمِثْلِ الْقَمَرِ. This seed is like the moon. And he says many, many other things that I don't have time to go on. But I want to draw us to another hadith of the Prophet, because everything is from the Prophet today. What does the Prophet say about the heart of the believer? قَلْبُ الْمُؤْمِنِ عَرْشُ الرَّحْمَنِ. The heart of the believer is the throne of the All-Merciful Lord. Right? If the heart of the believer is the throne of the All-Merciful Lord, what is stamped on that throne? Hussein is the ship of salvation. So thus the heart of the believer becomes truly the heart of the Rahman, the throne of the Rahman, when it has Hussein's name stamped on it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is all from the Prophet of Allah. This is from the Prophet of God. Today is the night of the Prophet. What the Prophet has taught us, the legacy that he has left us, the tradition that he has left us, the sunnah that he has left us. Now I'll share with you one more thing. Right? The reason I'm mentioning this is because now we're coming to the conclusion of Ayam Azza. I want to kind of bring us back to the beginning of what we are doing here. Shaykh Tusi narrates in Misbah al-Mutahajjid, one of the most famous and earliest books of supplication, a very, very important riwayah, where he says that there's so much to mention, but I've only mentioned here the most important things. Safwan comes to Imam as-Sadiq asking him that I want to go for the ziyarah of Hussein ibn Ali. And we already see that two things are joined together, ziyarah and azah. That the culture of ziyarat and the culture of azadari started at the same time, after the death of Imam Hussein. That people would go to the grave of Hussein, they would recite poetry and they would cry. That's what it says, Marartu bi qabr al-Hussein wa fafada alayhi dumu al-ghaziza, that I passed by the grave of Hussein and I began to cry. Or for example, Sharif Murtada says, the famous theologian, the student of Sharif Murtada, of Shaykh al-Mufid, what does he say? He says, وَمَا نَحْوِهُنَّ لِنَدَبٍ إِنَّمَا قَدُ فُرُودًا, which he takes it to a whole new level, and we have a hadith about this. He says that we don't just come here to mourn, we come here to complete our religion. So what does Shaykh Tusi narrate from Imam as-Sadiq? Imam as-Sadiq tells Safwan, he begins to introduce him to what to do for ziyarat. And then he says, فَإِنَّ أَبِي حَدَثَنِي عَنْ آبَائِهِ, that my father has narrated from his fathers. قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَسَلَّمَ, that the Messenger of Allah has narrated to me what? إِنَّ إِبْنِ هَذَا الْحُسَيْنِ يُقْتَلُ بَعْدِ عَلَى شَاطِئِ فُرَاتٍ, that surely this, my son Hussein, will be killed at the shores of the Furat. There's a point here to mention about the Prophet saying. He's saying, إِنَّ إِبْنِ هَذَا الْحُسَيْنِ, my son Hussein, this Hussein, meaning he could have been here, Ismul Ishara, meaning as if he's pointing, Ismul Ishara, he's pointing at him. So you could imagine that Abu Abdullah is in the audience with the Prophet when he's saying this. What does the Prophet say? The Prophet says, فَمَنْ زَارُهُ وَيَخْتَصَلَ مِنَ الْفُرَاتِ, the one who visits my son Hussein, the one who visits him, and performs ghusl from the Furat, or the Alkama, which is the branch of it. تَسَاقَطَتْ خَطَايَاهُ كَهَيْئَةِ يَوْمَ وَلَدَتْهُ أُمُّهُ. His misdeeds and sins fall off of him, erased, like the day he is born again. Who is telling us this? The Prophet of Allah. Where is this narrated? In some of the most famous and most known books, Kutub Mu'tabara. From Safwan going to Imam as-Sadiq, who's narrating to us from the Prophet himself. That the one who visits Hussein ibn Ali, it is as if he has been born again. It is as if the day he came from the womb of his mother. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It is during the final days of the Prophet, towards the end of his life, in the 10th year of Hijrah, that Malik al-Maut gave the Prophet the choice as to whether he wants to stay in this world or leave this world. Jibreel told the Prophet, لَسَوْفَ يُعْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى, that God will give you something that you will be so satisfied with. Jibreel told him that this is my last time coming down to you. for you are the reason for my existence. So Jibreel is giving his farewell to the Prophet. Among his final acts, the Prophet was asked the Sahaba to take him to Al-Baqi with Imam Ali, of course. He goes to Baqi and he says, Assalamu alaikum ya Ahl al-Qubur. Imagine, one of the final acts of the Prophet before his death was ziyarat of Qubur, visiting the graveyard. During this time and these 3 days, he came to the Mosque of Medina. The riwayat say that his head was wrapped in a bandage, and we do not know entirely why it was. And I'm just going to read the maqtal here. He gets on the mimbar in the masjid and he announces to the people that the time is running out. He says there is nothing between God and anyone except that Allah gives him khair. He says, Ya ma'ashirun nas, O the people, I swear by the one who sent me with haqq, that no one will be saved. There is no najat except for two things. The final kalam of the Prophet, among his final kalam, al-amal wa rahmatullah, our deeds and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. He then gets down from the mimbar and leads the jamaat with salat khafifa, with a short namaz. Imagine the heart of the Prophet in these final moments. He asks for their hands so he would be taken again to the masjid. He goes home and he came back again. He sat on the mimbar. Again he reminded the mu'mineen about death. Look, these are the things that the Prophet did at his final days, mu'mineen. He says, then I'm leaving behind you two things. In tamassaktum lan tadallu ba'di. I'm leaving you behind two things. If you hold on to them, you will not go astray. Again, he reminds the mu'mineen about the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. Then, of course, that individual, the Prophet asks for a pen and paper. That person says, Hasbuna kitabullah. You are not in the right mind, as is narrated in Bukhari and other sources. The Prophet gets angry and tells him to leave. The situation would continue. Sheikh Mufid and Tusi reports that in the final moments, the Prophet began saying, Ilayya ya Ali, Ilayya Ali, Ilayya Ali. Oh Ali, come to me. Oh Ali, come to me. Because what did the Prophet want at his final moments? He wanted the presence of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Not like others say he fell asleep in this other woman's lap and all these other things. No, he said, oh Ali, come to me. Oh Ali, come to me. Oh Ali, come to me. He began crying out for Ali, and Ali comes to him. He then asked for Hassan and Hussein. He then Sayyidah Zahra was already there. He embraces both of them on his chest and he says, La'anallah man yukhafihima. May Allah's lanat be on the one who puts down Hassan and Hussein. He's reminding again the ummah about the rights of Hassan and Hussein. Ali's hand was under his neck. Rasulullah's breathing, we could imagine, is now slowing down. And he passes away. Ali closes his eyes, Salamullahi alayhi, and points him towards the Qibla. He then is taken to do his ghusl and his kafan. Kulaini and Tusi narrate from Imam Bakr and Imam As-Sadiq that the Prophet told Imam Ali to prepare 6 water skins from well water used for plants. Wash me, shroud me, and anoint me. When you are finished with my ghusl and kafan, Ya Ali, ask me for whatever you wish. If you ask me for anything that you want, and I will respond to you. The traditions state that Alif Bab min al-ilm yanfatihu, that 1,000 doors of knowledge open for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Imam al-Hussein often would close his eyes and see the Prophet in his dream. So it is not unusual for us to see that the Prophet would inspire Ali even after his death. 1,000 doors of knowledge open for Ali ibn Abi Talib. That the soul of Ali was infused with the soul of Rasulullah even after Rasulullah's death. You could imagine. Abdullah ibn Shubr then tells us, and then other people, that on that day Ali was alone with Salman, Hassan, Hussein, Sayyidah Zahra, Sayyidah Zainab ibn Abbas, and just a few others. But it is also during the life of the Prophet, what do we see? That the Prophet would visit Ali and Fatima during their life. وَبَكَ بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا, and he would begin to cry. Why would he begin to cry? Amir al-Mu'mineen was shy to ask, what is going on, Ya Rasulullah? You have come to visit us and you are crying. Then Imam al-Hussein got up and sat in the lap of Rasulullah. Take your heart to Medina. Imam al-Hussein is looking at the Prophet. He says, oh my father, when you come here you bring us happiness, but today you are crying. And now you are making us cry. The Prophet turns to Hussein. He says, Ya Bunayya, Jibreel has just come to me and he's told me that you are going to die. وَأَنَا مَصَارِعُكُمْ شَتَّى, and your body will be left in Karbala. This is what the Prophet says. This is why we read in Ziyarat Nahiya, As-salamu ala juyub al-mudarrajat, peace be upon the chests that are stained in blood. As-salamu ala shifa'i dhabilat, peace be upon the lips that are dried up and cracked. As-salamu ala nufus al-mustalamat, peace be upon the souls that were stolen. As-salamu ala al-arwa al-mukhtalasat, as-salamu ala al-ajsad al-ariyat, peace be upon the soul, upon the bodies that were left uncovered. I will leave you with a poem from Sayyid Bahr al-Ulum. This is what the Prophet is referring to. وَمَصَارِعُكُمْ شَتَّى, and your bodies will be left scattered. Why? We read, Uryan yaksu Sa'id mulabisan, Ya Hussein. Your body was left in Karbala, and the desert and the sand became its cover. Afdihi maslub al-libas musarbalan, ripped up into pieces. لِصَدْرِ تَعْتَ الْخُيُورِ طَالِمًا, and the horses are riding up and down on it. بِسَرِيرِ جِبْرَائِيل, بِسَرِيرِهِ Jibreel كَانَ مُوَكِّلًا, but Jibreel is standing over the body of Hussein as blow after blow, as they take part after part from him. But Jibreel stands muwakkilan at the head of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله طيبين طاهرين ولعنة الله على قوم الظالمين.